I mentioned a little bit about what I've called distortion campaigns. Now, distortion campaigns are generally not well known. They are very extraordinarily difficult situations for people. People end up trying to commit suicide, going to prison, going to all sorts of losing their jobs, all sorts of terrible things. Distortion campaigns are usually committed when it's individual on individual. They're usually committed by somebody who has some deep issues with the target person. They're often referred to as BPD distortion campaigns, which is intended to create an association between what psychology would call borderline personality disorder and this sort of behavior. I'm not one for labels, as anybody knows my work. I think we should be labeling people, but what they do seem to, generally speaking, be to have in common is they're committed by somebody with a very, very deep, troubling emotional issue focused on one person. And the really interesting thing about them is they're carried out so strategically and so coldly and over such a period of time that when they do finally press the button and do whatever it is they want to do to bring this person down, the shock is incredible because they've sowed so many seeds over such a long period of time that's been so strategic and so well done that the person's friends turn away, people don't believe them. And that's what's absolutely stunning. I've been through one and I was in absolute shock because, it was all proved, disproved and everything sorted out, but the lengths that the person went to try and do this is astonishing. And what really surprised me, which is what surprised other people, is how many friends and associates got sucked in by it. And once you understand the mechanisms, once you appreciate the mechanisms, you can see why. Now, we could ask ourselves, how could somebody who's very emotionally troubled know all these tricks and tools? Well, if we to generalize, I don't like generalization, but we have to for the purposes of this book. People who have a lot of these issues have an intuition about how to manipulate people emotionally, how to get to trigger them emotionally. So in other words, people who get very easily emotionally triggered often have an intuitive sense how to easily emotionally trigger others. So for instance, to get sympathy or to get people angry or to recruit them. So it's more intuitive than it is intellectual. And in my case, as in the case of many, many others, because I have had the pleasure to work with many victims of this and get them back on their feet using the metaphysical tools and the disciplines I teach and help them get their lives back together. One of the things is that the person who started their campaign will often seek to get to know their friends, get close to their friends. So for instance, if it's online, they'll befriend the person's group online, or if it's in regular social circles, they'll become part of that social circle. And what will usually happen is they'll start sowing different seeds in different areas. And at first they're quite subtle. They can be quite subtle. It can be, for instance, just little triggers of, oh, did you see so-and-so with a woman the other week? Because I thought he was married. Well, no, he's married. I haven't seen him with a... Okay, fair enough. No more to be said. Start sowing little seeds and then say something else to another friend. And when those two friends get together over lunch, they start discussing things. And it creates this little web. And it's done very carefully and it's drip fed over a very long period of time, often years. Really, this is the surprising thing. Often years. Very carefully sown, very carefully done. Documents, sayings, things are kept and put into particular context, trying to paint a picture of this person. It's almost like, it always reminds me of one of those people that does one of these jigsaw puzzles with 5,000 pieces. You imagine their commitment and their patience must be extraordinary. What's usually burning inside them is some passion to right what they perceive as a wrong. Some way there's some emotional attachment to this person has wronged them in some way. Often not true, but they're very deeply triggered and very deeply traumatized by it, and it sort of haunts them. So somehow, some way, they're going to get even. And when the information does trot out, and when the victim turns to friends for support, often the friends have been indoctrinated over a very, very long time to the point where they're not absolutely sure that you're telling the truth, because they've heard different things, and they've heard different things from other friends, and they've heard different things from other friends, and the weight of evidence starts to, well, hang on, there's a lot of smoke here. Although there's no fire, we're very suspicious of the smoke. And as I say, the really staggering thing is the extent of it, how long a period it goes over, how complete it is, and part of the shock is that the person themselves is completely unaware of it, because one of the tactics that's used is that the person who's doing it is a victim, and so when they recruit your friends, they don't want you to say anything to them because they're frightened of you, or they don't want you to know, or they don't want you to know that the friend knows. So this so-called secret that's being shared with them is not true. So when eventually they do execute their plan, there's usually a point where they'll press the button or drop the bomb, as I call it. This is where people, I've worked with people whose kids have been taken away from them, have been thrown in jail for spousal and child abuse. They haven't got a clue what's going on. It's like total shock. They're completely in shock because the accusations have been woven subtly to friends and family over the years, who then sort of not necessarily believe it, but they don't necessarily disbelieve it and won't back them up. And suddenly they're in this terrible situation, had no clues coming. One of the problems is people tend to not believe they don't know anything about it, because there can't be any smoke without fire. So the victim is usually in absolute total shock that every pillar of stability that they knew has completely gone, and they can't understand why. It happened to me. As I say, the person was proved to be what they were. It took over a year, it took legal action, took all sorts of things, but it turned out people were telling me stuff they'd heard 18 months previous. I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? Well, we sort of thought you'd know something about it. Well, I don't know anything about it because it's false. And I'm not doing this because of personal stuff. I've dealt with what happened to me, but I've seen it happen to other people, and my aim is to help them avoid it and to recover from it when it happens. And so many people say to me, I'm not sure I believe in these distortion campaigns, but trust me, when it happens, the people are absolutely stunned, because it has been so strategic, so carefully planned, goes back over a long period of time. It's very sneaky, and the people will go to great extremes to get at their friends and family and sow these seeds of doubt and feed them into a web of distrust that the victim is completely unaware of, that when suddenly it happens, they turn to their friends and say, you all know that's not true, right? The friends turn and walk away. And holy heck, what happened? And they say, well, we heard a lot of stuff, but we didn't want to believe. What stuff? Well, surely you know about it. No. Well, you must be lying, because my other friends know about it, and other friends know about it, and other friends know about it. And often that can take a long time before everybody realizes they've been had. And it takes a long time because the general view is, well, no, if everybody knows about it, it must be true. And they find out that it's completely woven fantasy. So that is stunning. That really does destroy people's lives. I've seen that destroy many, many lives. And it's very unfortunate, because usually the person that perpetrates it has some deep, deep emotional issue, and often some sort of perceived slight or judgment by a person, the victim, the person they victimize. They somehow perceive this person has put them down or done something to them, and they're going to get back, but they're going to get back in a very sneaky way. So if you do hear about these things, if you do read about them, this is not just your normal drama. These are things that go on over years and designed to absolutely discredit people, to make them commit suicide, lose their partners, lose their jobs. The victim, the perpetrator, absolutely wants to destroy the person and will do anything to make that happen. And it's very dangerous and very scary. I'm not trying to scare people unduly, because these are not every day, but they do happen. So if somebody's trying to recruit you to believe things about people, just be aware there's a small chance it could be something like this, and it does have very serious implications, greater than you may imagine than just a little bit of casual gossip. So that's really all I wanted to say on distortion campaigns. But they are a very particular, very dangerous, very harmful, very strategic, quite unusual form of manipulation. And they are perpetrated by people with much more of an intuitive understanding of how to get into people and change that world model than an intellectual knowledge.